Hello and welcome to another episode of the Family Gamers Podcast. This is episode 389.
Hello and welcome everybody. It is the new year. This is our second episode of 2025 and already, Anitra, we're looking for ways to disconnect.
I mean, there's some extra reasons for that. We'll get into that later.
Yeah. Who are we? We are the Family Gamers. As always, I'm your host, Andrew, and I'm joined by my lovely and wonderful wife, Anitra.
That's me.
And we are excited to bring another show to you. A lot of people have been making jokes about how they're hoping that 2025 is not yet past the return period.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why we're going to talk this week about just games to disconnect. Games that help you kind of chill out. Games that maybe help you forget about the world for a little while. Stuff like that.
But in the meantime, you're going to give us a fact.
I am. Not my best work this week, 389. You'd be surprised. But, Anitra, what's the fastest animal in the world?
Land, sea, or air?
Air.
I don't know.
Oh, really? I don't know. Maybe it's a boy thing, but I always knew the peregrine falcon was the fastest animal in the world.
Okay.
When diving, the peregrine falcon can reach speeds of 242 miles per hour.
Okay.
Which is crazy, which translates to 389 kilometers per hour.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. So
that's insanely
don't be
fast.
The prey of a peregrine falcon, I guess.
I guess.
I don't know. I feel like that's one of those facts that every kid knows. I'm honestly surprised you didn't know that.
Not a boy.
Is it a boy thing? I didn't.
Maybe.
Maybe. But anyway, I guess falcons that are diving and murdering animals is just a boy thing. So fastest animal in the world, if you did not know, is the peregrine falcon. Diving or stooping is the other name for it at 389 kilometers per hour.
We also have a message from our sponsor. This week we'll be tackling another listener question: is it always better to buy a house than to rent? The short answer is, it depends. Generally, buying is better in the long term, but only if you're maintaining the home and the neighborhood doesn't fall out of favor. However, if you don't think you can live in the home for at least 3 years, if you don't have at least 5% for a down payment, or if you're in an area where rents are significantly cheaper than mortgages right now, which isn't very many places, but there are a few, then renting may be better, at least for now. When doing the math to see if your monthly cost will be cheaper if you were to buy, remember to consider maintenance costs, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and any utilities that are currently included with your rent. Owning a home isn't for everyone. But if you want help talking through whether it makes sense for you to buy or rent, set up a free phone call by going to firstmovefinancial.com/familygamers today.
All right. Thanks so much to First Move Financial for being such a great long-term partner to the Family Gamers.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Anitra, let's talk about some games that we've been playing. It's been a stressful time. There has not been a lot of game playing in our family right now.
Yeah, not a whole lot. There has been some because we are the Family Gamers.
It is one of the ways in which we de-stress. So what do you got on your list?
Well, first, I have a nice cuppa. I talked about this a little bit 2 weeks ago in our last podcast, but my review of this went live a week ago. It has been an incredibly helpful, not even de-stressing tool, just a way to take a little escape for 10 minutes from what has been one of the most stressful times of my life.
Well, I played a very dumb game with our boys, and I think you're probably going to hear the snap review for this game in the middle of this podcast, and it's the game Bite Your Tongue from R&R Games.
It was silly and cuter than I expected, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dumb game, but it's supposed to be a dumb game.
Right. It leans into being a dumb game.
Yeah, so this is a clue-giving game for everyone to guess the word that the clue giver is trying to give. Not a lot of creativity. You give the clues that are on the cards.
You literally read the
them
clues
by biting your tongue or letting your tongue hang out or pinching your nose, stuff like that. So
yeah,
just a very silly, casual game. These are the games that I've been playing, guys.
Yeah. We also played a nice game of Azul with a friend
it's
of
nice
ours.
to pull out the classics sometimes, right? Yeah.
And that's one that, we get Claire to sit down and play because she enjoys
totally
it too.
into it. I was actually a little surprised at quite how into it she was, but I didn't mind at all.
I think it's one of those ones where she feels like she doesn't have to learn anything new to do it, and so it's not stressful for her either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You all were making fun of me the whole time because you thought I was going to win, and we all lost, so...
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't all... Obviously, somebody won, but it wasn't either one of us.
Yeah.
All right, next on the list is the game Video Game Champion. I think we've talked about this before on the show.
Yeah, we talked about how it was a table hog.
Yeah, it continued to be a table hog. We played it again at 4 players. It was a really good time. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a long game, right? So,
yeah, surprisingly long, at least for me.
I think it says 45 minutes on the box. That is just not true.
That is a straight up lie.
It's not. We pretty much knew what we were doing. I mean, there was a little bit of teach involved, but it still took us an hour and a half, 2 hours to play.
About 2 hours, yeah.
It doesn't mean it's deep, right? It's fairly straightforward set collection across some, multiple levels of set, a little bit of resource management. But, if you, like us, were 80s and 90s kids that actually went to Blockbuster or your local video store and rented video games and or begged your parents to buy you video games or your grandparents, this game is going to be right up your alley in terms of nostalgia. So that's Video Game Champion from Arcane Wonders.
So let's talk about literally the only brand new game to us that we learned in the last 2 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
You purchased for Christmas Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard.
I don't even know if I bought this one for Christmas. Did I wrap this one and put it under the tree?
Maybe you didn't wrap it. I don't know.
I think this one. There were some other ones, but this one... So
it feels like it was a Christmas present.
We've talked a lot about Jekyll vs. Hyde as one of our favorite 2-player games.
Yes, we love
maybe of all time.
Love it.
And this is another game that was done by Mandu. I think the art was still done by Vincent Dutrait. It is a cooperative game where you and your partner, it is a 2-player cooperative game, are playing as Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. That's why the name of the game is Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. I know, shocking, right? Really interesting game, has a lot of the same DNA as the original Jekyll versus Hyde. This is another game that was localized by 25th Century. In fact, they're right in the middle of their 2025 international localization Kickstarter right now.
Yes.
So if you pop onto Kickstarter and just search for, 25th Century games, you're going to find all of the games that they're localizing this year. Really, Chad is doing amazing things with these localization projects.
Yeah.
I don't know how he comes up with the amount of time that it takes to do the work that he's doing. But it's really, really impressive. And Jekyll versus Hyde, I think we still like better than Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard. But that might just be a familiarity thing. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, we're still working through some of the rules on Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard, just understanding how the trick-taking works. It's a lot like Jekyll versus Hyde, but there's a couple of differences. And there's a lot more to explore in this game because there's a bunch of chapter scenarios. And we're still on the first one because we're trying to figure out what we're doing.
And we lost terribly. I mean, it was really bad.
Yeah.
So I just don't feel like it's quite as smooth of a game. And maybe it's because there's more things going on.
There's just more
that's
involved.
A legitimate possibility. Yep.
And speaking of a game with a lot of things involved, let's talk about Little Alchemists.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Little Alchemists, we talked about this game a little bit as well. This is a game from Czech Games Edition. It is kind of Alchemist Junior, I guess is the easiest way to say it, right? It's really fun. I'm really enjoying this game. I'm really enjoying the layering on that it does with scenarios and stuff like that in a lot of the same way that games like Zombie Kids and stuff really kind of layered on the complexity. So it started super simple and really built up over time. I think it's really cute. I think it's a smart way to use an app. It's definitely, obviously, a game for kids.
I think it's scaffolded in such a way that the first levels are very obviously kids' game. And the further we get into it, the more it's a light, family hobby game. It doesn't feel like a kid's game anymore now that we're up into chapter 6 or whatever it is.
I mean, it does, but it doesn't. The core gameplay loop is still the same, and it's still pretty simple, and it's guided by an app.
Yeah, but it feels like a kid's game in the way that Potion Explosion feels like a kid's game. It doesn't feel like the decisions are dumb or it's too light. It's just sort of the wrapping around the game makes it look more friendly, in my opinion.
I don't really agree with you.
Okay.
I think that the core loop is still the same simple loop. It's just got a lot of things hanging off of it, as opposed to the decision-making process being inherently more complex in a more adult game.
Okay.
That's my kind of take on that. I mean, our 10-year-old is playing it with absolutely no issue.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Either way, I think it's really fun. I like the progression mechanic in this game because you can play a game, and if you don't progress, it's not really a big deal. You don't feel like you failed by not progressing, So this is literally a game that could grow with your family.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those you can hit a point and be like, you know what? really liked this style of playing the game. We're just going to keep playing at this chapter level because we like it this way.
Yep. So that's Little Alchemist from Czech Games Edition.
One more quick one. I asked our son Asher the other day if he would play a board game with me. And I'm like, you pick anything you want. And so he was looking around. He's like, you know what? It's been a really long time since we played Malpeak or Skull Hollow. I was like, okay, sure. And we played Malpeak, and he destroyed me. And it's fine. In fact, he was like, I could just end the game right now, but I kind of want to keep playing. I'm like, no, go ahead, man. Just end the game.
Yeah, just kill him. Yep.
But it was a good time, and he was right that we haven't played in a while. I had not played in 366 days, according to my tracking app.
Quite, you missed it by one day.
Yeah. Well, I think Malpeak has that like wintry feel, and January is a good time to pull it out and play again.
Sure. I track that. Yep. 100%.
So, yeah.
All right. That's pretty much it. We really haven't been playing a whole lot. Anitra, it is 2025, like we said before. I think this might be the year we hit 1,000 members in the community. What do you think about that?
We're getting close in the Facebook community. That would be cool.
That would be pretty cool. We have a few more people, around 10 or so new members to the Facebook community that we would like to welcome. Do you want to get us started, or shall I?
Why don't you start?
All right. I'm going to start with welcoming Burkuraji to the Family Gamers community.
Welcome to Michael.
Welcome to Jen.
Welcome to Rosie.
Welcome to Insel.
Welcome to Tim.
Welcome to Adam.
And Scott.
Welcome to David.
Welcome to Robert.
Welcome to Christopher.
And welcome to Tommaso. We've got two cats playing some kind of abstract board game to welcome you to the community.
That is Shogun, I think? No, I looked it up. It's the game Shogi. It's an older game.
Sure, if you say so.
It's an abstract strategy game. But anyway. Anitra, speaking of the community, do you want to talk about some back talk from last episode?
So 2 weeks ago, we asked you all to tell us about your favorite new game in 2024. And by that, we mean new to you.
On Facebook, guess who answered first but one Nick Martinelli.
What?
Breaking out the scroll from BG Stats. He actually wrote BG States, but, I'm going to assume that he meant BG Stats. Here we go. Fast Flowing Forest Fellers, which I know nothing about, so Nick, write in and tell us all about this game. Beat the Buzzard, Zularetto, which is not a new game, but new maybe to them, Kahuna, and Fancy Feathers.
All right. Also on Facebook, we got Denny Marie, who said, best new to me family weight games this year, Deducto, Trio, and Gingerbread House. Those are all great choices.
Yeah.
But her 7 and 8-year-old's favorite game of the year was Century Golem Edition.
Love it.
Yes.
Century Golem is such a good game. This is a game that Claire, our legendarily not board gamer child, brings to Game Group. So I guess we really need to redefine what board game child means if she's bringing board games to Game Group, obviously. Well, anyway. Whatever.
Yes.
All right. What do we got on Discord, Anitra?
Gene says that probably their best new game of the past year was Sky Team.
That game is so good.
His teenager observes that it keeps the tension high right through to the end, and it maintains that tension by asking you to finesse rather than to dominate something.
Actually, that was one of the things in Jekyll and Hyde versus Scotland Yard that was so tricky, because in order to win, you have to perfectly land at the end, right? You can't just win so many tricks that you just blast through the ending. You have to kind of land at the end, just like Sky Team, where you have to land at the airport.
Ooh, I like the connections you're making.
Yep. All right, Stefan on Facebook says, Maracaibo has been on our shelf for a long time, and we had it set up 3 or 4 times, but never got to playing it until New Year's Eve. We've played it 9 times since, and actually leave it set up on the table, as we're certain we won't stop before we've played through the campaign. I'm a big fan of Feister, and this is my favorite of his games so far. Wormspan is the new-to-me game that I've played the most. I really like how different it is from Wingspan, and I can play them back-to-back without feeling like I've been playing the same game. But what about Finspan, Stefan?
We're not going to talk about Finspan. Over on Discord, Kristen said, this is a really tough question, but her favorite from this year is A Gentle Rain. I really enjoy just sitting down and playing a quick game. It's easy and satisfying. But she also has a big list of honorable mentions, including Trio, Mojo, Flip 7, Captain Flip, Exit the Advent Calendar, and Harmonies.
I feel like some of those games might show up in about 20 minutes.
You think? Maybe.
All right. Mark Spector comments on the post on Facebook and says, that is a tough question. Well, that's why we asked it, Mark. Duh. Removing my own publications, Mark is, of course, the Grand Poobah of Grand Gamers Guild. It's a tie between Red Cathedral and Mille Fiori, 2 games I've heard great things about.
Personally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
JP says, the 2 2024 games that I'm still thinking about playing again and again are Umbrella from Pandasaurus Games and Spotlight from Horrible Guild. I was really skeptical about Spotlight until I saw a demo of it, and now I'm interested in trying it out at some point.
All right. Tyler on Facebook says, we've had the most fun with Bomb Busters. I actually don't know anything about that game at all. The early training missions work well for my 7-year-old, and the later missions are a fun challenge for me and my wife after the kids have gone to sleep. Love that.
Zach, who is part of the extended Family Gamers rating team, says his favorite game of 2024 is Aang's Destiny.
Okay, did we ever tell the story about what happened at PAX with Aang's Destiny?
I think so, but if you want to give the quick version, go ahead.
Okay, so we have a long-standing relationship with the op, and they're incredible. They're amazing people, and we had a press meeting with the op. As we were talking about games that we think would be a good fit for us to review, and I mentioned Aang's Destiny. This is essentially the Harry Potter Hogwarts battle, but in the Avatar The Last Airbender universe. And they said, sure, we can get you a copy of that to review. And then I said, well, I'd also like to buy a copy because I know our family would really love it, and I had already promised Jeremy that their family could review this game, and I wanted to give it to our family for Christmas, blah, 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 blah. So we got a review copy. Purchased a second copy. This game is not small, so like the process of like hiding this and shoveling it around was difficult.
With all 3 of our children at PAX Unplugged with us.
Everybody was there. So we kind of we get it squirreled away or whatever, and it's in the back of the car covered up by a blanket. On the last day, we're packing up, and the blanket shifts, and one of our kids sees it and says, "Oh, we got this too." And in my kind of quick thinking dad thing, I actually lied to my son, which I'm not proud of.
Oh,
but
how dare
I did.
you.
And I kind of said like, oh, well, Mr. Pike gets to review this game, but we're still moving things around. Like we've got some of their stuff in our car because, you know, it was weird to like fit everything in to get out of the Airbnb and all the stuff. And he's like, oh, okay. And then Jeremy gave me like a little fist bump when, you know, our son walked away. And then later on, we were back at the booth, and they have this thing at PAX where if you scan the QR code on your badge, you can go to different booths and scan a QR code and you might win something. So our son, who had kind of noticed this, was standing right there, and I'm like, well, I'm at the op booth, I'll scan the thing. And so I scan the thing, and we win a copy of Aang's Destiny. And he's like, oh, sweet, now we have a copy. And I'm like, yeah, we sure do. So anyway, all that to say, we actually have a copy that sometime in 2025, we will be giving away, probably timing it with the review for Aang's Destiny. So get excited, because that's something that's going to be coming, really courtesy of the op / our Christmas budget. Family Gamers. Anyway, so glad to hear that you're loving that game so much, Zach, because I can't wait for us to play it over here.
At some point.
All right. Sean Snyder says, Hegemony was my favorite game. My favorite play was probably Villainous with the family.
Oh, nice.
Appreciate that.
Ken says, Sky Team for sure. My son and I love it. Rebirth is a close second, but Trio got to the table a lot with 35 plays.
Yeah.
That's a lot of plays.
That is a lot of plays. I have used up all of the Facebook, so I'm going to come over to Discord and help you out. Adrian says, the classic The Quest for El Dorado. I've been wanting to try it for years, and it finally happened. Honorable mentions, Kabanga. Great choice. For Northwood.
Also good.
Sea Salt and Paper.
Mm-hmm.
Saikatsu, A Pet's Life.
Mm-hmm.
Lure. Sagani. And Downforce. Some really good games in that list,
It's a great list.
Really good games. I played Wormspan 3 times in 2 days at Dicera West, and if I could play it again to confirm my thoughts, it might have been my number 1.
Interesting. Olivier says, Dwellings of Eldervale, for sure.
That's a big game.
It's a big game.
Yeah.
Such a fantastic game. Solid Euro mechanisms mixed with awesome production and player interaction. But he also says, So Clover has been a huge hit with everyone. Gamer friends, non-gamers, siblings, parents. And I love how it plays really well for any player count. We're big fans of So Clover.
Derek Ruff says, from the new to me games I played more than once, I'd have to pick The Wolves. It's such a fun and tight area control game, but Arcs is the game I played just once, and I really want to play it again.
I'm going to say I listened to Derek's podcast episode, the first Player Token podcast, about The Wolves, and it made me way more interested in the game.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I think this is done by Clarence Simpson. He's the same person who did Merchants of Magic, that game that we love.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anyway, Peter Schott says, the best new-to-me game might be Adventure Realms. If not, then Let's Go to Japan. My wife played and won Adventure Realms, and Let's Go is just a fun, easy game all around. Pretty casual, and we make a bigger deal about telling about our trip once done, just to recap and score. I kind of like that, where the emergent gameplay creates a narrative. Like, I think that's really fun. We kind of did that with Her Story, with having the kids talk about each person when they complete the set thing. Yep. Anyway, Adventure Realms is similar in many ways to Dune Imperium, but I found it a bit more accessible, if a little more limited in slots for workers.
Interesting.
All right, awesome. That was a lot of new games. Some of these have really kind of whet my appetite for some new stuff to maybe check out in 2025. What about you?
Yeah, same.
And with that, I think it's time for us to take a break.
I think so, yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear about Tong, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about games that we use to disconnect, either intentionally or games that we found helped us disconnect.
Yes.
Yeah, accidentally, I suppose.
We'll be right back.
Okay, guys, ready for some serious games or silly games?
Serious, but I like silly ones too. Silly.
Well, that's good because we're going to talk about a silly game this week. This is a snap review for Bite Your Tongue. Bite Your Tongue is a silly party game for 3 to 8 players ages 10 and up. It takes about 15 minutes to play, and it's published by R&R Games. So, boys, what do you think about the art in Bite Your Tongue?
I mean, I like the pouch, but there isn't too much on the cards. Just enough to remind you of how you're supposed to give the clues.
Speaking of clues, what do you use them for? Asher, what are the mechanics for Bite Your Tongue?
Bite Your Tongue is pretty simple. A game of Bite Your Tongue lasts long enough for everyone to be the clue giver one time. When you're the clue giver, take a card. The answer's at the bottom, and then you give the first clue by
holding your nose.
Then give the second clue by biting your tongue.
And give the third clue by pinching your nose and holding your tongue out.
Everyone gets one chance to guess, but they're only allowed one answer per clue. The clue giver gives the correct guess with a card. That's a point at the end of the game. The clue giver also takes a point token. If multiple people guess at the same time, everyone gets a point token. No need to fight it out. The clue giver can pass on a card if they don't think the guessers will get it, but it gets discarded for the rest of the game. They try to get people to guess as many clues as possible in 60 seconds. Then the next person gets to be the clue giver. Once everyone has been the clue giver once, tally up the points. Whoever has the most points wins.
All right, so let's talk about some expectations. Asher, what did you expect from this game?
I expected it to be a party game with biting your tongue and guessing things. I didn't think it'd be that original.
And you, Elliot?
I expected we'd be just like biting our tongues and trying to yell at each other.
All right, well, I expected a game that was going to be silly and honestly kind of forgettable. Sometimes that's just what you need with your kids, just to find a little bit of levity. So let's talk about surprises. Elliot, were there any surprises for you?
I mean, not really. I laughed a little harder than I expected to.
Laughing is good. Asher?
I was honestly surprised at how simple the game was. I also liked how quick it was, given it was so simple. And we did laugh a lot.
A lot of laughing.
A lot of laughing.
And that ultimately is what I'm going to come back to. I was kind of tentative to play this one with the boys because I was worried that they would just think it was dumb and complain the whole time. But honestly, they were actually more engaged than I expected. Limiting the turns to 1 minute apiece means a game shouldn't last a lot more than 10 to 15 minutes. Of course, you could go around the table a second time if you want to keep going. So there's not a ton to this game, but it's definitely good for some laughs. We're going to give Bite Your Tongue 2.5 tongues out of 5. And that's Bite Your Tongue in a Snap.
And we're back. So, our topic this week is games to play to disconnect from whatever's going on in your life.
Yep.
For me, that's games to play when I'm stressed out.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I deal with stress, I think, differently than you do. And
You think?
Well, but I mean, for me, it's just kind of things kind of keep piling on. I'm like, I need to disconnect. It's like a recognition. And I don't know if that's better or worse. It's probably not better, but I need to do different things.
That I agree on. It's definitely I need to do something else right now.
So as you and I were talking about this, we very obviously realized that we not only define the way to get away from stress is different, but our definition of how to get away from stress, the kinds of things that we use to get away from stress are very different.
Yes. So for me, it's things where it doesn't put a bunch of extra stress on my brain. Things where I already know the rules, I know what to do. You're going to give me choices, but not too many.
Yeah, and for me, it's, I don't want to say the complete opposite, because I think those things would work for me too. But for me, it really, truly is the disconnection from the world. So, for example, for me, like a word game, even though I like to be thinking about stuff, a word game doesn't work for me because it's still grounded in like what we're doing, the kind of stuff that we're interacting with on a daily basis. And so it would still continue to remind me of what's going on.
And funny enough, for me, a word game would also be bad, but that's because any word game that we play has too many choices.
So because I'm able to disconnect with something that's more complicated, I don't mind a lot of rules, but I wouldn't be able to disconnect by learning a new game.
Sure.
Because the process of learning is still a thing that's grounded in reality, because the way that I learn things is I relate them to other things.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be able to learn something new, but like playing a more complicated game for me is an escape because I can get totally into that game. Whereas for you, it's not quite like that.
I'm guessing for you, something that's really deeply thematic would work really well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Interestingly enough, also, I don't know if I would play a game to escape that is a multiplayer competitive game.
Sure.
I think that might, for me, because they're still interpersonal, like, but I think a cooperative game would work.
Okay.
You know, I'm not really sure. Like, anything narrative would totally work for me because it's pulling me kind of into that world, things like that.
So it's funny. This is one of those areas where it's pretty different for me. I think both of us would probably tend towards something like a solo game. But if it's not going to be a solo game, for me, I think I would prefer something that is gently competitive. I'm thinking of the kinds of games where I feel like I've accomplished something no matter what else is going on in the game. Like the kind of games where I feel good about losing because I feel like I still built something, I did something.
So one of the kind of like parallel solitaire games, like a Dominion or whatever, those games that I usually rail against, but you would like something like that?
Something like that would work. I'm thinking especially of something like Lanterns, where it's like, oh, hey, we made this beautiful like display out on the table. And like I got those little dopamine hits from like trading in my little lantern tiles, but mostly like it just looks nice at the end. And that always gives me a sense of satisfaction, even if I lost.
It was really interesting because as you talk about this, I'm thinking about other games that have some kind of tableau building thing in it, which is sort of what you're describing with Lanterns. The game that popped into my mind was Tranquility, which is that kind of solo game where...
/ cooperative, yeah.
Yeah, / cooperative, where you're trying to line up all of the things, but the numbers have to be sequential.
Right.
And I first thought, like, oh, that would really work. But then I realized it wouldn't. And the reason why is because it requires deduction. And deduction for me is not relaxing at all.
No.
I bet it is for some people. But like that, like the game or like one of these things where you're kind of trying to get into the other person's head. Nope, absolutely not.
I could probably do Tranquility as a solo game in this situation.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
But as a cooperative game, you've got that deduction and the limited communication, and that just, it ratchets the whole stress level way up.
Yeah, I actually it's kind of the perfect solo game for me because... Unlike you had said, like, you don't really want to be doing too much thinking or whatever. If I'm only in my own mind and I'm, like, kind of doing all this processing and stuff and I'm sort of stepping away from things and just processing in the abstract, that is great for me.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that we have different, I don't want to say triggers, but, like, different ways in which we sort of facilitate our escape.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes we like to escape together, but that's a different thing.
That is a different thing. I can definitely picture you would probably love playing like a solo game of Role Player, and that's just way too much math for me. Too much math, not a good escape for me. That makes my brain work too hard.
We haven't switched over to let's list some games that would work as escapes for us, but that might have been my number one. Thanks for nothing.
You're welcome.
Do you want to jump there now, or do you want to keep talking about this?
Let's talk about it just a little bit more.
Okay.
So I think there are a few aspects here we agree on. Not word games, not highly competitive games, gently competitive or cooperative, but it needs to be in a low pressure kind of way.
Yeah, I think so.
Something where your task is really straightforward. So maybe like a Castle Panic or something where like you're trying to fight off the guys, but not one of those limited communication games, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Little Alchemist as well.
Okay.
This is a game that is like co-opetition,
Yep,
right? So
yep.
it's you're cooperatively working through the box, but there are winners and losers to each game. But there's really nothing about this game that kind of requires you to be grounded in anything real.
Yeah, and to my point earlier, I also think it's one of those games that you have a pretty limited set of decisions each turn, and you can't plan very far ahead.
Right.
So
Which works well for me.
it works well for me too.
And one of the other games that's already on my list, we'll talk about second half. I think when we did the review for that game, it is exactly what I said appealed to me most about it.
Okay. So I think maybe at this point we just hop into it and talk about some of our top games for this sort of relaxing, get away from it all feel. And we'll see where maybe we have a little bit of overlap.
We might have some overlap.
I think we'll
I'm
have
not really
some.
Sure. Okay. I'll just start with Role Player because you already, mentioned it.
I mean, it's your favorite game. I figured it would be a good choice.
Role Player is, I just love it as a game in general. I love the number puzzle of this game. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Thunderworks does really speaks to me. I kind of like the world of, I don't remember what the world is. There's a name for the world that all that stuff
Eulos,
is. Eulos,
maybe?
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at you. The world of Eulos, that kind of high fantasy world that all that stuff resides in, really is kind of my jam. Role Player with the number crunching and all the different things you're trying to maintain at the same time. I mean, I don't know that it's the kind of game that playing at multiplayer would work as an escape for me, even though it's one of my favorite games, because there's a little bit too much friction that would take me out of the experience
Sure.
as it goes from player to player. And I think that friction is a big part of this. It's a huge part of your ability to lose yourself into a game. The more frictionless the experience, the more you can flow from step to step, the less likely you are to take those moments of stopping and adjusting or whatever that, kind of defines what friction is in a game and think about the things that you're trying to escape from, right?
Yeah.
In a single player mode of Role Player, that friction doesn't really exist because, I mean, assuming you know the rules of the game, you progress from step to step to step and you're kind of fine. This is, by the way, why I can't universally say that like a narrative game would fit in this. Like you would think, oh, he's trying to escape. I would rather read a book in that situation.
Or play a video
because-
game with a strong narrative.
I mean, maybe, but going back and forth between the process of observing a narrative and then having to like lock in and use the other side of your brain to do all those mechanical stuff, like that back and forth, I don't know if that would work super well, at least for me, when we're talking about trying to de-stress.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
There are certain video games that do a really good job of telling the story in the engine. And so there's less, yanking back and forth.
Sure.
Or
Yep.
they're telling you the story while you're controlling the character walking through the story, even though you're not really doing anything. And then it kind of, you lose the cinema bars at the top and the bottom or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, okay, you're now in the action again. Those games, I think, probably would work really well for that kind of a thing.
Sure.
Yeah, or just a game where there's like chatter between characters while you're just playing.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff works. But when you're going back and forth between the two of them, it gets a little bit harder.
All right, interesting.
Yep, so that's Role Player for me. Solo Role Player.
So, for a lot of the same reasons you just talked about, my favorite game would not fit well into this category because there is limited decision making, but there is a lot of friction and needing to change your plans constantly. And it's not gentle in its competition. It's pretty cutthroat, which is Imhotep. So like that would not be a good fit here for me.
Okay. So you're saying it's not a good relationship.
Yeah, I'm just.
Oh, okay. I was really getting confused.
You got me thinking in that direction.
Sure.
I'm like, would that work? No, it would not.
Okay.
Mostly because I get very mean with it, and if I can't be mean with it, I'm gonna have a harder time staying in the game.
Yeah, you're super mean to me. In that game.
I mean everybody in
Yeah,
that
that's
game.
true.
Let's be fair.
That's true.
I think my top game for this sort of games to disconnect has got to be A Gentle Rain. I mean, we've talked
Sure.
about this a bunch of times
Yeah.
before. The whole concept of the game is just like, take a deep breath. You're going to match flowers and you're going to lay the tiles out and If you managed to put all 8 flowers out, great. And if you didn't, try again next time. It's super chill in that way. And for me, the pattern matching is a pretty limited decision space. You look at the 4 flowers you have on a tile and you're like, can I put it here? Can I put it here? Where can I match up more than one edge? Does it fit? Yes, no, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely my top choice. And it can be played cooperatively if you really want to. I pretty much always play it solo.
Yeah, I mean, that game just for me has never really...
It doesn't hit for you. That's okay.
It does not hit
That's
for
all right.
me, like, at all. I almost feel bad saying that because I feel like it should be just a wonderful experience. Nope.
Not every game is for everyone. Most games are not for everyone.
Next, I'm going to talk about kind of a group of games that really work well for me in this, and it's the good escape room games. I think of the Holiday Hijinks. They're good at what they do. And some of the ones that don't work as well, there's not a lot of continuity between puzzles. And so you're just like, okay, so there's some stuff happening and there's just more puzzles and then there's just more puzzles and then there's just more puzzles. And things like the Holiday Hijinks, like there's a flow to what's happening and you're working towards something at the end. This is kind of like embedding the gameplay within the narrative in a way that doesn't cause a lot of friction because there's only 18 cards. So you can't have this like, okay, we're going to stop. We're going to read 3 paragraphs. Then we're going to get back to it. It's just like boom, boom, boom. It's the next thing. It's the next thing.
Do you think maybe some of the more heavily themed unlock games would also fit this for you because there's sort of a plot or a narrative in place and you're following it? I'm thinking of the Star Wars ones, the Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz.
The Star Wars ones were better. They were constructed a little bit differently. I still feel like the unlock games are a little janky.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is I think the ones where you kind of have a feeling for the story arc before you go in
agree.
Seem to have a little less of that jankiness.
I agree. I still think they're a little janky. Like, there's the thing in the Star Wars one where you have to, like, scratch the microphone or whatever, and it's super unobvious, you know, what you're trying to... So there's some weird stuff like that, a little bit of janky stuff, and I've always felt that way with the Space Cowboys games.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Take it or leave it, I guess, on that one.
Sure.
But I just think the ones that flow really smoothly, this is a weird thing. I want to say like the easier exit boxes, not so much because the puzzles are easy, but because they want you to keep going because they know that probably you've got younger players that are playing these games. So they don't have that start and stop quite as much.
They don't overwhelm you with too many puzzle options at once. No, because the easier exits usually have a distinct flow. You do this puzzle, don't turn the page, don't look at anything else until you solve this puzzle. When you're done, then go on to the next one.
Yeah. I don't know that overwhelm would be the word that I would use. It's more of like a distract kind of a thing. It's just a different mind space. It's a different headspace for me where I'm like, okay, well, now I have to make choices. And the moment I'm making those kinds of choices, because like I don't have a board to anchor my choices.
Right.
I just kind of have abstract choice A or abstract choice B, and it doesn't flow.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my second one, is a large collection of games.
Okay. Well, I'm also going to go with a collection or a genre of game, which is not every game in the genre, but a lot of really abstract games.
Okay.
Will work well for me on this. So I'm thinking games like Quarto or Corridor or maybe Boop, although Boop gets a little bit too mean.
No, I'm fine with that.
No, I mean, for me, like it gets a little bit, it gets a little bit too mean. And so I don't always feel good afterwards. Like I enjoy playing it, but I'm looking for games that make me feel like, okay, that was a good experience when I'm done.
Okay. You did something there, maybe on purpose, maybe inadvertently, I don't even know, which I think is great, which is you listed a bunch of abstract games that are not that complicated. Like,
yes.
Like chess would not fit this.
Oh, yeah, no,
me,
not
right?
chess.
There's too much thinking. There's too many possibilities. You picked a set of games where it's like, okay, I move this piece. Like Shobu is like on the edge for me, right?
Yes.
Because Shobu is more complicated than your Boop, than your Corridor, your Quarto, the Gigamic white box games.
Yeah. Or even like Cinco Linko, which is a glorified tic-tac-toe. All of these simpler games, what makes them simpler is that your decision space is smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes,
you really only have a couple of choices on any one turn. Shobu is right on the edge because you can have up to like 8 or 10 possible moves every single turn. And then you got to kind of work through like, okay, well, if I do this, then what then? And if I do this, then this happens. And that could be a little much.
Well, here's a question for you. Would you describe Tether as something similar? Because I was thinking about Tether as a game that, even though I said before, like, probably not a competitive game, like, Tether is, I mean, it's just numbers, right? It's just a number grid, and I like number stuff, and I think that would probably work for me.
That would go solidly in the maybes for me, because we've played games of Tether where you have that frustrating, like, nothing in my hand works. Nothing in my hand works.
Okay.
And going that direction of, like, having some turns where, oh, well, you actually just can't do anything, that doesn't feel good either.
I agree with that. I agree with that. So maybe not Tether, but, you know, a lot of these other abstracts where there's at least something you can do.
Yeah.
Sure. My, I guess, third and final is going to be a game that I mentioned it before. It's the one where you kind of react to what's on the table kind of thing. And this is Tasso Banana.
Sure.
I talked about this in the snap for Tasso Banana. I mean, this is a dexterity game that plays literally on the box that the game comes in. The box unfolds. You can put it on a table in a restaurant, even though it's a dexterity game. We played it with 5 people crammed around a table. You're just balancing bananas on each other. It's very simple. I don't have to bring a lot of baggage to the table, whether that baggage is good or bad. In the context of this show, the implication is that the baggage is bad. I don't have to bring anything. And I really like that.
I think there are some other dexterity games that fit in this category too, but I think that one's a great example because, like, there's no differentiation between the pieces. You're not doing something like Go Cuckoo where you pull a stick out and then go, oh, well, because I pulled this color, now I have to do this thing. No, it's, I have a banana. Let me find a place to put it.
Yeah, and even the penalties if you don't do something right are pretty minor.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you might look and be like, well, I'm clearly not going to win this game, but it's not even like a suspend where if you hang something wrong and like 5 things fall off, you're like, ugh, I'm just buried, right?
Yeah.
You don't have that weight, which is the whole thing you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. This whole class of dexterity games give you that, again, that little dopamine boost every single turn of like, yes, I did it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
one
great.
One more game from you. What do you got?
Well, I'm going to do one more class of games, which is there are a whole lot of button shy solo games.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them work for me, but in general, the button shy solo games, because you're starting with 18 cards, they always give you that limited decision space. You're never going to have that like, oh, well, the whole world is open to me and I could do anything. My personal favorites here would probably be Rove, which is the one where you're moving a robot around.
Mm-hmm.
Sprawlopolis, which is the most thematic and open worldish, I think.
Sure.
There's ones like Riverwild and Unsurmountable, where you're basically building a tableau of things as you go along. And a nice cuppa, which really came into my life at just the right time. It's got a very meta theme in this case, where the theme is that you're trying to ignore the stresses and worries in your life and make a perfect cup of tea. But I also found that it plays the best when you intentionally work to limit how many decisions you're going to have in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand. No, I get that a lot. And it's kind of what I talked about with Agueda, because there are decisions to make in that game, but at any moment, there's only a couple. So you kind of progress through that pretty easily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but some of our top choices in this being able to disconnect, ignore the things that are bothering you, and just focus on a game.
Mm-hmm.
Role player, if you're a math head like Andrew, A Gentle Rain, the good escape room games that flow well and don't give you too many puzzles to work on at once. Some simpler abstract games, again, the ones that don't give you too many different kinds of choices at once, the ones where you don't have to plan way ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Tasso Banana, and some other dexterity games, but that one's great because, again, very few choices.
Mm-hmm. And it's not crushingly penalizing if something doesn't go well.
Yeah.
So you're not despondent about it.
And a lot of the button shy solo games. There's a whole other class of those that I don't particularly care for, but if you're a little bit more mathy like Andrew, you might like. But in general, you can look at the themes there and find one that appeals to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Anitra will put this whole list in the show notes, as usual, because she's awesome. All right. That leads us, obviously, to our next backtalk question, which, I mean, I kind of like this pattern of talking about something and then asking you all about it. So
Yeah.
we just talked a lot about games that we use to disconnect and the ways in which we disconnect, which are different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
What is your go-to game if you are stressed out or you want to disconnect or whatever it might be? What is the number one game in your little tool belt, we'll say, to step away from the stresses or the otherwise busyness of the world? You can let us know on all sorts of places. Obviously, the best ones are the two that we read every week. The Family Tabletop Community on Discord. You can get there by going to thefamilygamers.com/Discord or in the Family Gamers community.
The Family Gamers community is on Facebook. Find us on Facebook and X and Instagram and YouTube at Family Gamers AA. There's also a link to both of these communities in the show notes every single week.
Mm-hmm. All right, you can also email us if there's anything else you want to share with us. Andrew at thefamilygamers.com.
Anitra at thefamilygamers.com.
Please don't forget to subscribe to this show and tell your friends about the show. Honestly, it is by far the best way that we can grow and, just get the word out about the best games that you can play with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
You can also leave us a review at Apple Podcast or whatever your podcast subscription source is. You can find us on Amazon Music, on TuneIn, on Spotify. We try to be everywhere.
And thanks to the folks who are now listening to us on YouTube Music. I do see it in the stats, so thanks for listening there.
Yeah, that one actually helps us as well with growing the YouTube channel. By the way, if you're not watching our snap reviews on YouTube, you totally should.
You
That
really
bite
should.
your tongue thing that you just heard in the break, you can actually see it on YouTube with the boys, and it's very silly. We do have that for science segment of the show. We've got one that we're working on that we'll do soon. But if you want to send us weird food to eat and talk about on the show, you can always do that as well by sending us mail at The Family Gamers, 60 Auburn Street, number 528, Auburn, Massachusetts, 01501.
The Family Gamers is sponsored by First Move Financial. You should also go to firstmovefinancial.com/familygamers. There you can learn how the team at First Move Financial can help you pile up the victory points.
Thanks so much again to the team over at First Move Financial for sponsoring the show. All right, Anitra, that's it. That's it for us. Hopefully the next 2 weeks will be less stressful than the last 2 weeks.
I hope so.
I can't even imagine how that might... Even with the inauguration, I cannot imagine how these 2 weeks are going to be more stressful.
We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, we'll let you know all about that in a couple of weeks. So until then, everybody,
Play games with your kids.